Picture a tennis stadium that seats just over 10,000 people, sold out completely in half an hour, for a player who isn't even ranked in the top 10 of her sport. That's the story that unfolded in Toronto this week, and if you think that sounds like an exaggeration, stick around, because the real numbers are almost stranger than fiction. Her name is Alex Eala, she's 21 years old, she's from Manila, and by the time she landed in Canada for the National Bank Open, she was riding the kind of momentum that most athletes wait an entire career to feel even once. Just days earlier, in Washington, D.C., she had beaten Jessica Pegula to win her first ever WTA Tour singles title, becoming the first tennis player from the Philippines to capture a title on the WTA Tour. That alone would be a career-defining headline for most players. For Eala, it turned out to be a warm-up act, because what waited for her in Toronto was something tennis hadn't really seen in a long time. When tournament organizers announced that her second-round match would be played on a Wednesday night, the tickets for that session were gone within 30 minutes, according to National Bank Open Tournament Director Carl Hale, who has run the event for 2 decades and has genuinely never seen anything quite like this. He put it plainly, he'd never watched a player ranked outside the top 5 move tickets the way she did, and he suspected her fans had simply been waiting all along to find out exactly when she'd step onto the court. So let's rewind a little, because to understand why a 21-year-old ranked around 20th in the world can sell out a stadium faster than some Grand Slam champions, you have to understand where this fan base actually came from, and it didn't happen overnight. The seeds of this were planted back in 2025, when Eala made a run to the semifinals of the Miami Open, a WTA 1000 event, and along the way she knocked out 2 top 5 opponents, which is the kind of result that turns heads inside the sport but doesn't necessarily register outside it. What did register outside it was the Filipino diaspora, a global community spread across continents. And once they caught wind of a genuine contender who represented the Philippines on the biggest stages in tennis, they started showing up in numbers that tournament organizers were completely unprepared for. It kept building from there. At last year's US Open in New York, the crowd noise around her first-round match made it feel like a far bigger occasion than a standard opening round contest usually does, and she delivered a comeback win that marked the first time a Filipino player had ever won a match at a Grand Slam. That win lit the fuse. By the time the Australian Open rolled around this year, fans were lining up for hours just to get into the grounds and catch a glimpse of her, even though she was ranked 49th in the world at that point and ultimately lost that opening match to an American player named Alicia Parks. Here's the detail that tells you everything about how loud this support already was. Parks, the woman who beat her, later commented on just how deafening the flags, signs, and chanting had been, coming from the opponent's side, not even Eala's own bench. So when the draw for Toronto put Eala against that very same Alicia Parks in the second round, there was an obvious sense that this wasn't just another tennis match. It was a rematch with a score to settle, playing out in front of the loudest crowd of her career so far. And that crowd, by the way, wasn't small by accident. Sobeys Stadium in Toronto holds just over 10,000 people, and organizers projected that a significant majority of that crowd would be of Filipino heritage, turning what's normally a fairly reserved tennis atmosphere into something closer to a home crowd at a World Cup match. Families showed up dressed in the colors of the Philippine flag, kids held up handwritten signs, and every single changeover became an opportunity for the crowd to erupt into chants pushing her forward. Hale, the tournament director, said he's used to seeing pockets of national pride show up for players from Romania or Turkey or Poland, hundreds of fans here and there for those countries' rising stars. But what he witnessed for Eala was on a completely different scale, something he flat out called unprecedented in his 20 years running the event. And when she finally took the court against Parks, she delivered. It wasn't a clean sweep, she dropped the first set, but she settled into her rhythm, found her range, and closed it out in 3 sets to get her revenge for that Australian Open defeat, sending the stadium into an absolute frenzy in the process. What made the moment resonate even more was what happened after the final point, when Eala was handed the microphone and greeted the crowd first in Tagalog before switching to English, telling everyone in that stadium how many flags she could see, how grateful she felt, and how much this moment meant to her, coming right off the emotional high of winning her first title in Washington just days before. It's worth pausing here to talk about why this particular athlete has become the face of something so much bigger than her ranking suggests, because tennis has genuinely been searching for a breakout star capable of pulling in audiences that don't traditionally follow the sport, and Eala might be exactly that. She trained early on with the Rafael Nadal Academy in Spain. She spent years working her way up through the grinding week-to-week reality of the WTA Tour, and unlike a lot of prodigies who get hyped up and fade, she's kept climbing steadily, now sitting around the 20th spot in the world rankings with a level that keeps trending upward. But rankings alone don't explain stadiums selling out in 30 minutes. What explains it is representation. The Philippines is a nation of well over 100 million people, with one of the largest overseas diasporas on the planet, spread through North America, the Middle East, and beyond, and until Eala came along, that enormous population had never really had a tennis star of their own to rally behind. So when she plays, it's not simply Filipino fans supporting an athlete they like, it's an entire diaspora finally getting to see themselves represented at the top level of a sport that, for decades, felt like it belonged to a different world entirely. That's why the reaction in Toronto wasn't just enthusiastic, it was emotional, borderline overwhelming, the kind of atmosphere commentators started comparing to the fervor Rafael Nadal generates in Spain or Roger Federer generates in Switzerland, except this was happening for a player who, statistically, is still relatively new to being a top 20 presence on tour. And it wasn't just tennis fans who noticed. In the same week that Eala was filling stadiums in Toronto, Mercedes-Benz was rolling out its brand new global partnership with the WTA at that very tournament, officially becoming the tour's principal partner and exclusive automotive partner as part of a long-term agreement that reportedly runs into the tens of millions of dollars annually. The scale of that deal is worth sitting with for a second. Some reports have pegged the commitment at roughly $50 million a year, potentially stretching out for up to a decade, which would put it in the same conversation as some of the biggest media rights deals in all of women's sports. Mercedes chose the National Bank Open as the stage to introduce Canadian fans to this new partnership, bringing in a fleet of electrified vehicles to shuttle players around, displaying new models like the all-electric CLA around the tournament grounds, and running fan activities tied to the brand's presence throughout the event. In other words, a massive global automaker had already committed serious money to be visible at exactly the kind of high-profile, emotionally charged moment that Eala's matches had become, and whether that was calculated timing or simple coincidence, the optics lined up perfectly, a corporate giant investing in women's tennis on the same night the sport's newest breakout star was filling a stadium beyond capacity. It says something about where her career trajectory is heading, because brands don't chase noise for no reason, they chase attention, and attention is exactly what follows Eala wherever her schedule takes her next, whether that's a WTA 1000 event in Canada or the smaller stops most casual fans never even hear about. What's remarkable is that none of this appears to be a short-term spike either. This is now a pattern that's repeated across multiple continents over more than a year. Miami, New York, Melbourne, Washington, and now Toronto, each stop adding another layer to a following that keeps compounding on itself rather than fading after the initial excitement wears off. And that raises the obvious question everyone in tennis is now asking out loud. What happens when she actually breaks into the true elite of the sport, the top 10, the Grand Slam finals, the kind of results that would put her name next to the biggest stars currently playing? Because right now, she's pulling sold-out, flag-waving, chanting crowds while still working her way up the rankings, which means if her results keep climbing the way they have been, the crowds attached to her name are only going to get bigger, louder, and harder for tournaments to plan around. Tournament organizers are already having to think differently because of her, scheduling considerations, seating capacity, security planning, all the logistics that come with hosting a player whose drawing power has outpaced her seeding, and that's an unusual problem for any sport to have, let alone one that's historically struggled to produce new global faces outside of a small handful of dominant names. There's also something worth noting about how she's handled all of this attention, because by all accounts she hasn't let the hype distort her focus. In the days leading into Toronto, she spoke about being excited to experience a full house rather than being weighed down by the pressure of it, and after her win over Parks she seemed genuinely moved rather than performative about the reception she received, which tends to matter a lot to fans who've watched plenty of athletes handle sudden fame less gracefully. That's part of why this connection between Eala and her supporters doesn't feel manufactured. It feels like a genuine, mutual moment between an athlete who represents an entire diaspora and a fan base that has been waiting a long time for someone to represent them at this level. So where does this go from here? The National Bank Open is still ongoing, and every match she plays from this point forward is going to carry a little more weight, a few more cameras, a slightly bigger crowd than the round before. Beyond Toronto, the tour keeps moving, the rankings keep updating, and the next major test on the calendar is the US Open, a tournament where she's already made history once and where the entire tennis world will be watching to see whether Toronto was a peak or simply the next step in a trajectory that keeps climbing. If the pattern holds, and there's very little reason right now to think it won't, Alex Eala isn't just having a breakout month. She's becoming one of the genuine storylines of the entire WTA season, the kind of player broadcasters build promotional packages around and tournaments quietly hope lands in their draw. Whatever happens next, one thing is already clear from what happened in Toronto this week. Tennis found a player who can move an entire diaspora to show up, chant, wave flags, and turn a routine second-round match into one of the most talked-about moments of the tournament. And that's not something that happens by accident, and it's definitely not something that's going to quiet down anytime soon.